Good evening, this is the Oscar expert here with Brother Bro. It's time to review The Last Duel. This is a Ridley Scott directed film starring Jodie Comer, Matt Damon, Adam Driver, and Ben Affleck. It takes place in the 1300s in medieval times with knights wearing armor and swords. When I first heard about this project, I was like, why are we going back to medieval times? Like, does Ridley Scott think that he's making Gladiator Part 2? Not yet, but actually he probably is going to. But this film, I was very surprised at how much I liked it and how up my alley it was, because a solid 80% of this is just straight up drama. This film is told from 3 different perspectives. It surrounds an act of sexual violence and is told from 2 of the male perspectives, and then finally the female perspective, which they make very clear the female perspective is the one that is closest to reality. What you get is a really subversive take on the medieval genre. It made me very aware that we're used to seeing stories from this time period told from male perspectives. Often we don't really see the struggles that women are going through because they're too busy hugging their men as they come home from battle on their horses. And so this narrative we're given in the first act of one where it's a quest for honor and to regain dignity is completely turned on its head, satirized to some degree. And then you're fed a completely different story about somebody fighting for their humanity. And so for me, this storytelling structure really worked. What Ridley Scott and writers Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, and Nicole Halfson are really giving us here, more than anything, I think, is like a critique of patriarchy. You really come to see how these men are just consumed in the ideas of like what it means to be a man and the sort of values that you're supposed to have and that are rewarded by your society. We see how Matt Damon and Adam Driver and Ben Affleck are very obsessed with taking land and going out there and like proving themselves as fighters. And the reason that they're doing most of these things seems to be because it benefits themselves and their own positions and reputations within their world. And on top of that, it's their ego, and there's a lot of dick measuring going on here. So when the film shifts to a female perspective, the view that we have on this world gets kind of turned upside down, and we see it from another lens. It's kind of like how a fish like doesn't know that they're swimming in water. That's sort of what patriarchy is. It's like these men that are literally missing pieces of reality because they do not recognize like what they are in. At first you see these characters at face value, and then you slowly realize they're very, very silly. Their values don't make very much sense, and the film is poking a lot of fun at them. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck both have very goofy haircuts, and some people have seemed to criticize the film for being goofy, but I really liked that it went that way, because again, we're supposed to look at them as being sort of ridiculous. There are some really funny lines that highlight like the ignorance of the men. I like that nobody is really sympathetic in this film by the end of it. There's no like good guy who is helping her out. There's no female allies either. I think that is probably true to the time period, that there really were no men that you could feel safe around, whether it's just having them not inflict violence upon you, or whether you could feel safe talking about some act of violence committed against you. And you also see how men can trick themselves into thinking that they're being noble and misperceiving the cues of women. That happens a lot because you see a lot of the same scenes play out twice from different perspectives, and it's really interesting to watch for the differences there. Yeah, like the kiss they showed 3 times. I loved how every one was just a little bit different, but it meant something so completely separate. And at the center of the story, it is a traumatic event that's happening to this one woman, but we see how the men around her take the event to be about them, and then it becomes this whole spectacle that has really nothing to do with addressing the actual problem here. That actually felt weirdly similar to today, because when you see accusations made publicly, there's a whole circus around that. Before I saw this film, I thought, if you're going to parallel some of the issues that are going on in our times, why not just make a movie about our times? And I completely see why they did this medieval film that parallels our times, because it's actually important to recognize that there has never been a point in history where women have been equal and safe. And films about the past like very, very often gloss over that. And so we really shouldn't have this rosy-eyed view of what history has been like. And also those sort of days that get glorified with like knights and swords and everything. I think a lot of society's values kind of stem from that sort of culture in some way, and those things are still part of where we're at right now. And I really loved how it shows how men think differently about solving problems than women do. I thought the third act especially had a lot of really great like nuances they picked up, and especially there was one scene that I found really moving where a very unsympathetic female character has a moment, and I won't say what it is, but I found it very moving and real. I do want to touch on the scene where Lady Marguerite is raped. Definitely proceed with caution and know that they don't just like cut around the act. This is going to be like traumatic for some people to watch. If you have a scene like that in your film, you have to be really careful if you are a male director. I do wonder like how much sensitivity was this handled with? I don't think it was bad, but I do think it's important to like open up the floor and validate criticisms of that portrayal, because a man cannot really like understand what kind of trauma a female audience member could bring into that scene. I think it's a good conversation to have, but I'm not gonna be like the one to teach anybody about it. Ridley Scott does give you some of those action scenes you expect out of a medieval film. I think there's something interesting about the fact that, you know, the medieval genre overall, like what's titillating about it is framed within that whole honor, dignity, masculine perspective. Just watching like two guys sword fight with lots of like hunky armor, giving you that at all is sort of feeding into like what we were just saying, you know, the values and like the excitement that come out of those films. I think it does a good job of like, it gives you that, and there's nothing really wrong with that. But by the time it's happening and you're experiencing that last duel, it does feel different because you really care about the helpless victim in that situation rather than rooting for one of these macho guys to win. And the entire event itself seems almost farcical. The action scene at the end was like giving me it. It could rank up with any great action scene that Ridley Scott has ever done. It was very thrilling. It wants you to be thrilled by the action and kind of get what you came for, but I think it does enough after that scene to kind of contextualize that. Also, I need to compliment that in the action scene at the end in the duel, excellent use of slow motion, which was not annoying and just felt like I need to see this in slow motion because there's just so much happening. And I love that there was no music in this. It was just like clinging and clanging and shit. I think that the movie would definitely deserve a sound nomination based on that scene alone. I mean, technically the movie overall, like production design, the costumes would be more than worthy of being in the Oscar conversation. But for the most part, I was really surprised with how much of a drama this was. The dramatic scenes were well done. They were very well acted. I loved like the close-ups that they used. I thought the editing in those scenes was really strong. All the attention to the period design and the costumes, like I felt very immersed in that world. And some people are saying it's a little slow for them or a little boring. Like I didn't find it that way at all. This was a very quick 2.5 hours in my opinion. Yeah. It was maybe a little slow to start, a little bit tougher to get into, but once I started coasting, I thought the movie just got better and better, especially once you get to Jodie Comer's perspective. And then there's the duel, like all that. Great second half. The writing I thought was really strong here. Nicole Holofcener, who helmed the third act, picked up on a lot of nuances without it ever feeling like she was hitting you over the head with anything. One thing in particular really got me where Adam Driver is like, in his mind, he's like playfully like picking up and like twirling around these people that he's like having orgies with. And as he's picking her up, she's like playfully being like, no, like stop. And then later this is paralleled and I was like, that is brilliant. It really made a point in a subtle way. I think it did each perspective really well, and I could see why they told it that way. Some people have said, well, shouldn't this be a movie from just the female's perspective? And that would just be a different kind of movie to me, because what I really got out of it was like, you start at point A, which mirrors like how we experience medieval dramas in general, and then it's even more powerful to see, you know, how point A is subverted by the end. That just would not exist, and that was the brilliance of the movie for me. Performances, all around very good, especially Jodie Comer. Yeah, the third act, Jodie Comer absolutely steals like the whole movie. She runs away with it. This was probably one of the best performances of the year, I thought. And with all these performances, but especially Jodie Comer, the way that she plays it differently in these different perspectives is really powerful. I was not convinced if I liked Matt Damon's performance in the first act because I couldn't tell what he was doing with his accent. And I didn't know whether like this character was really funny or not. And by the end, like, I think he made really good choices all around, because I was very convinced that he was this guy who believed he was this giant, and by the end you're like, no. I think everybody's gonna like Ben Affleck in this. He's clearly somebody who you're supposed to be kind of laughing at. And Adam Driver I thought was also great throughout. Yeah, I wasn't sure where Jodie Comer was gonna fall in the Best Actress conversation, but after seeing the movie, it's clear that she's going to be in this conversation because she is just caliber. She's Oscar caliber in this film. I'm not gonna expect that any of the male performances are gonna get nominated. And also I'm kind of looking at adapted screenplay and I'm like, why not The Last Duel? Because that category seems to be like a little bit empty. If I had seen this movie before reactions, I probably would have thought this could definitely be like an across-the-board contender. But a lot of people don't seem to like it as much as we do. Although Jodie Comer is clearly going to be in the conversation to some extent, and the movie has production elements like costumes, production design, and sound that would be more than worthy of like being in the Crafts nominations. But the reviews are definitely less than raves overall, and currently the movie is not doing too well at the box office. So I don't know if there's much of a case to make that it gets into Best Picture unless like something changes or it becomes bigger on streaming or they really campaign it. I do feel like this is a film that most people would like and would connect with. And so like for me, this would be a really good Best Picture candidate. But I agree, it doesn't seem like this is gonna end up being a top Best Picture contender. But like production design, for example, wait, that's too crowded right now. I can't even imagine the last Duel getting in. It's like not a priority movie. I think this could actually get sound. And I think that Jodie Comer could actually get actress. I do think the cinematography was very good at times, but I wasn't always a fan of the sort of desaturated or like ultra blue color grading. I didn't mind that actually. I felt like it kind of fit the tone. But overall, I was very surprised with how much I liked this movie. I thought the shifting perspectives made for like a great commentary on the way that patriarchy can put on blind spots to women perspectives. I give this a solid 9 out of 10. I'm also going with a 9 out of 10. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. When was your last duel?